المشاكل تقيف لكن لو بقينا ضعفاء الزول بيجي بخوشة بدي يقول لي أنا بشاكل ما تقبل كلام كثير حتى لو بقى أبوه حتى لو بقى أمه يجرب لخطأ لأنه جنوب السودان ده دولة بتاعنا وما في زول بيحميه حتى يسمى القوات كله بس ما بيسمى بقول ده قوات شعب المسألة يعني الجيش بيحمينا والدولة قادر يحمي الدولة ده ما ينراك عشان يجي يحمينا أنا يا أبو نحمي الدولة بتاعنا ده ما في زول بيصوردون برا.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. Live from Juba, on air and online.
This is iRadio News.
Hello, this is iRadio News. First, here are the headlines. The Commissioner of Teach County in Warabi State says at least 15 people have been killed and 5 others wounded following fresh clashes between government forces and opposition troops in Athony, a government-designated buffer zone. The SPLM government and allied parties have called for the removal of the praise unconditional release from a draft RJMA communique, arguing it undermines ongoing judicial processes, while SPLM-IO representatives have urged for the language to be revised to reflect a spirit of dialogue and reconciliation. And South African Deputy President Paul Mashitile arrived in Juba this morning for consultations on implementing the 2018 Revitalized Peace Agreement. Tune in for these stories and more coming to you in our news bulletin with me, Wol Mapal. Now the news in detail. The Commissioner of Teach County in Warabi State says at least 15 people have been killed and 5 others wounded following fresh clashes between government forces and opposition troops in Athony, a government-designated buffer zone. Mabior Morubi stated that among the casualties were 8 SSPDF soldiers, 6 from the SPLM-IO and 1 civilian who was caught in the crossfire. According to the area commissioner, Mr. Mabior, the clashes that began on Monday evening and continued into Tuesday morning also left 5 SSPDF soldiers wounded. The injured are currently receiving medical treatment. Mabior said in a statement, and I quote, "By Monday evening, 8 soldiers from both sides were confirmed dead. The following morning, the forces split into 2 factions, with IO elements declaring themselves openly. Heavy fighting resumed, leading to the death of an additional 7, making a total of 15 soldiers." End quote. He said forces loyal to the SPLA-IO have since been driven out of their bases. Mabior attributed the confrontation to tension surrounding the ongoing court trial of Dr. Riek Machar and his co-accused, which he said triggered hostilities between the rival forces. He added that security forces have been deployed to prevent further violence and calm has returned. On Tuesday, Colonel Lam Paul Gabriel, SPLA-IO spokesperson, confirmed that fighting erupted between the SPLA-IO component of the Unified VIP Protection Force and the SSPDF. He said the fighting was ongoing but did not provide further details, adding that more information would follow. The SPLM government and allied parties have called for the removal of the praise unconditional release from a draft RJMA communique, arguing it undermines ongoing judicial processes, while SPLM-IO representatives have urged for the language to be revised to reflect a spirit of dialogue and reconciliation. The SPLM argued that those referred to are already on trial and should not be described as detainees, while SPLM-IO delegates pushed for revising the language instead of removing it entirely. Ellen Samuel files more on these particular reports.
To heated exchanges beginning with SPLM representative Nadia Arop Dudi, who argued that the individuals in question were already in court and no longer fit the definition of detainees. She suggested the language be relocated under a section on dialogue and peace implementation.
The language that has put here unconditionally releases all the SPLM-IO detainees, embrace dialogue and return to full and inclusive implementation of peace of our as is in the letters and spirit. My concern, according to what Pierre here, since now, and the lawyers will confirm that the detainees now are no longer detainees because they are in the court. But this, what has been put, the urging, the language as has been put here is very important to be transferred to page 4 under B, because we are talking about the dialogue, and it is very important and it is called for everyone. This is my opinion.
Justice Minister Dr. Joseph Geng Akech backed her position, asserting that RGMEC has no mandate to comment on judicial matters and called for the entire section to be removed.
We have said, and I think this is well established, that judicial proceedings would not be brought to the public discourse. So these parts should be expunged completely. From the unconditional release all the way should be expunged. Because when a matter is in court, no party is allowed to ask except if the prosecution feels they want to stay the proceedings. But no party is allowed to intervene if they are not parties to the judicial proceedings. And that, if it happens, is a contempt of court. So we remove it entirely.
However, SPLM-IO representative Yolanda Ayuel rejected the proposal to scrap the clause entirely. She called for the language to be softened but retained to reflect the complexity of the situation and the need for continued dialogue.
The item 7, which I agree with my sister here, we can be transferred under item 10 under B, but we should not lose the overall picture of what we need to actually captured here. I agree with with my brother, who is actually like a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but at the end of the day, it is not business as usual. We are dealing with a very complex situation whereby we need to be very careful on how we are doing things so that we don't lose the focus of what we are getting at. Thank you. Yes, I'm saying instead of scrapping it all together, and also instead of scrapping the number 6, like what my brother mentioned in regard to mentioning the names, why don't we paraphrase it? Why don't you look at a better lenient way of actually saying what we need to pass, through to the public without compromising the process as he mentioned?
Dr. Geng reiterated that referring to accused individuals as detainees was inappropriate and disrespectful to the judiciary.
First of all, what's the mandate of RGMEC? Is the RGMEC saying the court should stop and release the accused persons? I think I am not aware if that's the mandate of the RGMEC. If the RGMEC is saying stop your judicial proceedings, this is what we are saying here, that it serves no purpose to have it there because it is not the mandate of RGMEC. Secondly, if referring to dialogue, a dialogue does not mean you stop the judicial proceedings because that's a political decision. And the ongoing judicial process is a judicial process. So I think what we are saying is that there's nothing that has not been covered here in terms of when the RGMEC notes with concerns the delays in implementation and urges the parties to fast-track implementation. It does not have to mention the release, and it is even mentioned unconditional release, and then they are characterized as detainees. This is to be polite. This is disrespectful to the judicial system, if I have to be polite.
A civil society representative aligned with the SPLM-IO's position, warning that removing the language entirely would ignore ongoing issues such as arbitrary arrests and shrinking civic space.
From our sitting at the stakeholders, we feel that the language may need to be restructured in the sense that we don't need to be so specific about some of the things. But also, we must not forget about the issues of arbitrary arrest and also harassment, because these all count to the issues of civic and political space. And we cannot forget to say that those who are arbitrary arrest and who are arbitrarily being held in detention can also be released, regardless of which party they belong to, because they are South Sudanese. So that is something that also need to come out very clearly in this minute.
Minister of Cabinet Affairs Dr. Martin Elia Lomuro supported the view that RJMEC's role should remain advisory and warned against language that could be perceived as political pressure on the courts.
Chairman, I think the role of RJMEC is advisory, advise the government. And the word dialogue is the best that we can use. And if I were you, I would say 6 could run up to the point where you say, claim the life of senior SSPDF general, UNMISS helicopter crew member, among other facilities, subsequent arrests and detentions. I would put full stop there. I would remove the other part because this is where the dialogue comes in. And this is sufficiently covered under 10. If you look at 10, and who are you going to dialogue with? It is the parties, it is the party in conflict, you see, so that you're not accused of directing the president or making a political statement. I think that is not in our favor.
After intense debate, members agreed to remove references to unconditional release and detainees from the draft communique while retaining a strong emphasis on dialogue and reconciliation. Before the meeting ended, UK Ambassador to South Sudan, David Ashley, proposed that the document include a reference to the significant suffering and loss of life experienced by civilians due to the country's ongoing political and security challenges. The suggestion was accepted. In response, RJMEC chairperson Ambassador George Owino praised the members for their frank engagement and confirmed the draft communique had been adopted with the agreed amendments.
So, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished members of RJMEC, as we move towards the end of this, we will capture all those additions and subtractions on this draft, so that we suggest that it can be adopted, taking into consideration the adjustments that members have raised, and then that will be circulated after that. So if that is okay, then the draft can be. Are we comfortable with that? Thank you very much. The draft resolution is adopted.
The RJMEC plenary officially adopted the revised communique, highlighting a commitment to dialogue and reconciliation while avoiding legal interference. For iRadio News, Helen Samuel reporting.
Thank you so much, Ellen Samuel. Moving on with our stories, South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile arrived in Juba this morning for consultations on implementing the 2018 revitalized peace agreement. In a statement published on the South African government page, the visit underscores South Africa's commitment to supporting efforts toward lasting peace, development and stability in the nation. The Deputy President and his team were received at Juba International Airport by South Sudan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Mande Semaya Kumba, as well as a delegation of top South Sudanese and South African officials. Other welcoming dignitaries include the Director General of Bilateral, Ambassador Philip Jade, the South Sudan Ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Simon Doku, and his South African counterpart, Malhodi Mofe. During his 2-day trip, Deputy President Mashatile will hold primary discussions with President Salva Kiir and other key signatories to the revitalized agreement. The consultations will also include meetings with various stakeholders in a push to expedite the implementation of the R-Access and secure a sustainable path forward for the South Sudanese people. According to the statement, the visit comes at a critical time for South Sudanese peace process, where international engagement is seen as vital for resolving outstanding issues related to the political transition. You are listening to iRadio News. A former political detainee has urged the immediate establishment of the hybrid court for South Sudan to ensure justice and accountability, citing continued fighting on the ground. Speaking at the 4th RJMEC extraordinary meeting in Juba on Tuesday, Major General Kwareng described the sporadic clashes as a serious breach of the peace deal. He urged the international community to push for the formation of the hybrid court, which he said remains the only mechanism capable of addressing and processing all human rights violations in the country.
I'm calling on the both to cease the hostility, to stop hostility, and to come back to implement the agreements to cease fire. This is my complaint, and then I'm urging the IG to come back to the process to cease fire. Also, I'm urging the international community to look into a hybrid court, because the formation of the hybrid court has installed, and that is the only process that will bring back the peaceful process. Because today there is a serious violations among the parties who are fighting on the grounds, and that will be the only court that will manage and will process all the human violations in this country. Thank you.
The 2018 revitalized peace agreement requires the African Union and the government in Juba to set up a tribunal for South Sudan to investigate and prosecute individuals suspected of committing crimes since the conflict began in December 2013. Chapter 5 of the 2018 revitalized peace agreement stipulates the establishment of an independent hybrid court to be led by the African Union Commission to investigate and, where necessary, prosecutes individuals bearing responsibility for violations of international law or applicable South Sudan law. It's 7 years since the peace deal was signed, with a commitment to set up the hybrid court in the country, but the tribunal has not been formed despite its approval by the government. The trial of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and co-accused resumed in Juba this morning, but independent media outlets were barred from the courtroom by security personnel. The special court resumed its proceedings on Wednesday morning, October 8th, following Monday's session in the ongoing Nasir incident trial of suspended Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and his co-accused. This morning, when reporters arrived at the venue, were initially told by security officers that they could only enter if they surrendered mobile phones, cameras and recording devices, a condition several journalists complied with by entering as ordinary citizens. However, security personnel soon ordered all journalists to leave. One ejected reporter said, and I quote, "I was sitting inside with a colleague from Radio Miraya with members of the public, but security came and told us journalists are not allowed to attend." End quote. While reporters from independent media outlets were barred, those from the state-owned South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation were later permitted to enter the proceedings. This action contradicts earlier statements from both the presiding judge and the Minister of Justice, who had assured that the proceedings were open to the public and the press. The move follows a warning issued during the previous session by Judge James Halala, who cautioned that the special court might resort to closed sessions. This was after an audio recording of the first Vice President's testimony which was read by the late investigator, was leaked, despite the judge stressing that the sitting was in camera, meaning no recording or filming was permitted. And before regional international stories, the South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network has criticized the barring of independent media from the 8th session of the Machar trial in Juba this morning. In a statement dated 8th October and seen by iRadio, the network described the move as the unlawful barring of independent media from the trial of suspended first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and 8 co-accused, despite early assurance that proceedings would be open to the public. James Bidal, head of the Secretariat of South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network, said the move raises serious concerns about press freedom and the fairness of the judicial process. Bidal said, and I quote, "This is a direct assault on the fundamental right to a free press and an independent judiciary. The government's promise of an open trial must be honored and not undermined by arbitrary restrictions. The public deserves to witness the proceedings of such a significant case to ensure justice is served." End quote. The rights group is calling for an immediate reversal of the decision and is urging authorities to guarantee unrestricted media access going forward. It argued that open trials are critical for maintaining public trust in the judicial system and for upholding justice and accountability. You are listening to iRadio News. Now to the regional international stories. It is my colleague, Memo Lesuba.
Thanks, Wol Mapal. Making headlines on the African soil and elsewhere, Burkina Faso's military government says it has arrested 8 members of a Dutch-based humanitarian organization, accusing them of spying and treason. There are 3 Europeans, a Malian and 4 Burkinabe, among them the NGO's country director and deputy. The organization said they were detained some time ago, but it was not previously reported. Security Minister Muhammadu Sana said the NGO had collected and passed on sensitive security information that could be detrimental to national security and the interests of Burkina Faso to foreign powers. In Nigeria, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, Uche Nyachi, has resigned just days after allegations emerged that he had forged his academic credentials. The resignation follows a newspaper investigation that claimed Nyachi submitted falsified certificates to President Bola Tinubu during his ministerial appointment in 2023. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga confirmed Nyachi's resignation in a post on X late on Tuesday, quoting the minister as saying he had been a target or blackmailed by political opponents. Finally, at least 24 people were killed and 47 wounded while protesting against Myanmar's military government after an army motorized paraglider dropped 2 bombs on the crowd. A spokesperson for the government in exile has said the military attack on Monday evening as around 100 people gathered in Chuang Yu township in central Myanmar for a national holiday. Thousands have died and millions have been displaced since 2021 when the army seized power, triggering a civil war with armed resistance groups and ethnic militias. That's all making headlines on the African soil and elsewhere. Back to you, Wol Mapal.
Thank you so much, Lesuba Memo. And now to the world of sports, the same Lesuba.
Thanks once more, Wol Mapal. In the world of sports, Francis Amin Michael, president of the South Sudan Football Federation, has been appointed to the FIFA Member Associations Committee, marking a major milestone for South Sudanese football. The committee oversees governance, development programs, and reforms for FIFA's 211 member associations. Amin's appointment underscores South Sudan's growing influence in global football, reflecting progress in infrastructure, youth development, and women's football under his leadership. The committee is chaired by Jorge Solomon, with Ivar Pohlak of Estonia as deputy chair and Rajesh Patel of Fiji. Colin Kebenana-Shepi has set his sights on breaking Waide van Nieback's 400-meter world record after being crowned world champion last month. The 21-year-old from Botswana ran the 10th fastest time in history when he clocked 43 minutes and 53 seconds to win gold in Tokyo. South African Van Nieback's record of 43 and 3 seconds has stood since he won Olympic gold at the 2016 Games in Rio de Janeiro. Kebenana-Shepi's victory saw him become the first man from his country to land a world title, following in the footsteps of Amantol Monsho, who won the women's 400-meter in Daegu in 2011. Finally, LeBron James, widely regarded as football's greatest player, has sparked speculation about his future in the NBA with a cryptic social media post teasing a second decision. A video showed James sitting across from another man on a basketball court captioned, "The decision of all decisions." The post quickly went viral, amazing over 1.3 million likes on Instagram by Tuesday. Fans wondered if James, who turns 41 in December, was considering retirement. However, on Tuesday, he revealed the teaser was a promotion for a drinks brand, not an announcement about his career. The video echoed the format of James' famous 2010 announcement known as The Decision, when he revealed he was leaving the Cleveland Cavaliers.
For the removal of the press and conditional release from a draft RJMA communique, arguing it undermines ongoing judicial processes, while SPLMI of representatives have urged for the language to be revised to reflect a spirit of dialogue and reconciliation. And finally, South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile arrived in Juba this morning for consultations on implementing the 2018 Revitalize Peace Agreement. That is the end of our radio news. If there is a story or an event you would like our reader to cover or report about, please send us a text message on +211 925 287 870. It's also our WhatsApp number. Follow us on X at iRadio Juba, like our Facebook page, iRadio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRadio South Sudan. You can also visit our website and listen to us online at www.iRadio.org. Stay tuned for news in Arabic at half past the hour. I am Wol Mapal. Thank you for listening.